Kelso, it is an
What's up?
honor and a pleasure, my friend, to have you on the Books for Guys podcast this week. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, funny story. You and I, we met for the first time a few weeks ago, and for those of you that don't know, Kris and I, we're both located in the Nashville area.
Yep.
And I joined the Nashville Entrepreneur Center about a month ago, and it was funny as I was talking to a bunch of the guys there about Books for Guys, and there were a few of them that were like, "You got to talk to Kris Kelso. You got to talk to Kris Kelso." I was
Yes.
like, "Him and I are actually meeting like tomorrow at the time," and so it was pretty cool that my first experience at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, your name was mentioned several times.
Wow. Yeah, I was actually just at the Entrepreneur Center not 30 minutes ago. So
Oh.
I'm there somewhat frequently. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, that's awesome. Yeah, it's a great place. But no, it's a pleasure to get to know you and talk about your book today, Overcoming the Imposter.
Mm.
Um, and kind of just wanted to start here. So we're going to kind of get into your background and just kind of your career and how you got to writing this book. But for those that don't really know what imposter syndrome is, can
Yeah.
you give us an overview of what exactly that is?
Sure. Imposter syndrome is it's a psychological term that was coined in the 1970s, actually. So it's not a new thing, though. It's had a lot more visibility over the last 5 or 6 years. It refers to the tendency of many people, it turns out, to overvalue other people's accomplishments and to undervalue or even doubt the reality of their own success. So what happens is when you have imposter syndrome, you look at other people and you say, well, they're successful because they're smart and they're savvy and they have a plan and they execute it well and they really seem to know what they're doing. Whereas my success has involved a lot of luck and timing, and boy, I sure made a lot of mistakes along the way and managed to figure out my way through it. But most of the time I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just sort of figuring it out day in and day out. And the truth is that most of us are figuring it out day in and day out. But the underlying fear of imposter syndrome is at some point I'm going to do or say something that is going to make everyone else realize that I really don't know what I'm doing. And then I'm
Mhm.
going to be exposed as the fraud that I think I am.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, and it's funny you say that. I was having some conversations the other day with someone. We were talking about kind of going to books for a second here about the power of like biographies and
Yeah.
realizing that people we see who are successful most of the time they're just trying to figure it out too, and they're hitting speed
Yes.
bumps and doing all this. And so it's good to for just someone like myself who's trying to build something and be successful, realizing a lot of the people ahead of me were kind of doing the same thing, just trying to figure it out. And there's nothing to be
Yeah.
ashamed of or nothing to feel like that you shouldn't be here. You should have
Yes.
confidence that
Right.
what you're doing is probably exactly what other people were doing as well.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, and I wish I knew who originally said it, but I've heard it multiple times, is it takes a long time to become an overnight success.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think so often we see someone's success, we see the end result. We stand at the finish line of their career and see this great accomplishment, but we don't see all the work that it took to get there.
Yeah.
Or even to take the race or the running metaphor even further, we see them run the race. We don't see all the prep that took place and all
Yeah.
the setbacks they may have had in trying to train for that race.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it seems like sometimes people just come out of nowhere and they get it perfect and they do it great and they're amazing. And usually there's a long story behind that.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly, exactly. Well, you wrote this book, and it was published about 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
And kind of looking over your career, you started in web development, software development, and then, you've been an advisor and a coach and a speaker for so long now. What led you to wanting to write this book?
Yeah, it is really a journey that I've been on. And as you said, I started off, early in my career. I was in software development, web design, worked in several big healthcare companies. and then started my first business in 2007, so a little under 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a consulting firm, and I was doing IT work. And initially, I thought I would do mostly technical work, the same kind of stuff, software and things. And I found myself doing a lot of complex project management. And eventually, what I had was a team of mostly former CIOs and VP of IT level people. So we were doing a lot of the leadership part of technology,
Mm.
and so that was a big shift for me. But
Mhm.
it was sort of I guess I would describe it more as a gravitational pull than an intentional or a decision to just change gears. Like I just kept getting pulled into the leadership side and the communication side and the strategic side of
Yeah.
technology, and so then eventually grew that company for a while, eventually co-founded a second company which I ran as CEO, and had a CTO that did all of the technology. So I was really kind of getting away from the technical side and focusing
Yeah.
on business, and my passions and my interests were really in the business area of things, and the business strategy and the financial side and things like that. Well, all along the way, as I said, I was figuring it out as I went, going
Yeah.
from software development to eventually running, two different companies, and then transitioning into becoming a leadership coach, which is the
Mhm.
shift that I made around 2018 to doing coaching and speaking and some leadership training. That was all a learning process. It was a journey of breaking new ground and figuring out new things, and learning lessons and then teaching them to other people
Yeah.
along the way. And so for a lot of that period, I wrestled with that fear of, man, do I really know what I'm doing? And do other people see things in me that aren't really there?
Mhm.
Is the respect that I get and the admiration that I might feel from people, is that genuine, or are they believing in a lie, or do they think something of me that isn't really true or genuine? And so I experienced this thing called imposter syndrome. Didn't know what it was called, but
Yeah.
wrestled with self-doubt for a lot of that career. And when I learned about imposter syndrome for the first time, it really was a sort of a weight lifted off my shoulder just to understand that it was a thing,
Yeah.
and that psychologists had identified it and studied it, and that lots of people, this is the crazy thing, is studies have shown up to 80% of the population experience some form of imposter syndrome through their career,
Wow.
and it tends to be more prevalent among high achievers.
Mhm.
And so this was one of the clinchers for me, and the things that led me to eventually start talking about this. And then I wrote an article that kind of got a lot of visibility, and that turned into a book, and now a course and coaching programs
Yeah.
and speeches around the world. Um, it When I realized that the more ambitious you are, the more driven you are, the more you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, the more likely you are to feel like you're in over your head and you don't know what you're doing. And so it's sort of this paradoxical problem. The people you think that you from the outside believe are the most confident are often some of the most insecure and fearful people, that because they don't know whether they actually know what they're doing, or they're just figuring it out,
Yeah.
which in most cases both are true, right?
Yeah.
So I was seeing this a lot and talking with other colleagues about it, and the response that I would get when I would speak about it or share just kept telling me there was a real issue there. I had struck a nerve, and that I had a unique take on it. And I didn't write a book just to become an author, or because I thought that I just wanted to write a book. I wrote a book because I realized I had something unique to say that I couldn't find in the market anywhere else. And I've
Yeah.
often said that it became a compulsion that this book needed to be written, and since it wasn't written, I had to write it. And I just felt like I really needed to write and publish this book. And so it came out, as you said, in January of 21.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. That was one of the questions I was going to ask, is just kind of as you transitioned into more leadership and kind of being pushed or pulled into that space, did you personally feel the imposter syndrome as, hey, I don't know if I should be here or not, or
Yeah.
I think I know what I'm doing, but and other people seem to think that, but I'm still kind of struggling with Do I really, I think, and I don't know, I was kind of reading some stuff earlier where, nowadays too with social media, you see people who are, you see clips and they're successful and they're doing all these good things. You don't necessarily
Yes.
see kind of their struggles. Do you think that plays a part now, maybe even more so than 10, 20 years ago? And again, this is, fairly recently, termed, 1970s, you said, but
Yeah.
your experience over the last 5 to 10 years, do you think it's more prevalent now than even back then, just because of all that we see from other people?
Absolutely, I do. I think that the one of the biggest traps in relation to imposter syndrome is what I call the comparison trap. And President Teddy Roosevelt said, "Comparison is the thief of joy."
Hmm.
And when we compare ourselves to someone else, almost 100% of the time, what we're comparing is the reality of our life to a highly polished and filtered version of someone else's life because we only see what they want us to see. And I think that you're right. Social media and the massive connectedness of our world online has only made that worse. And I'm not anti social media. There's a lot of good in that connectivity, but it does create a lot of landmines for someone who is wrestling with doubt, because what you see often is the highlight reel of everybody else's life and career.
Yeah.
And so you see them doing amazing things and they're crushing it and they're so awesome and they're going on these dream vacations and they're running this amazing company and they're winning all these awards,
Yeah.
and they don't typically show, the struggle and the setback and the failure, the mistake, the big hurdle that they have to get over. Some people are getting better about that, and I,
Yeah.
I really am appreciative of some of the vulnerability that people display
Yes.
online, because I think it is more encouraging to show the struggle than to show all the success.
Yeah.
But often, depending on who you're connected with and what kind of feed you have access to, it can just breed this fear and this doubt, and that comparison trap is very real.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I don't know if it's from books I've read, but I feel like I've been pretty blessed to be somebody who loves to cheer people on. When they succeed, it's almost
Yeah,
like an exciting thing.
yeah,
Like, man, that's awesome. Like, I can't wait to do that one day. And I don't know if it was like a switch. And again, it's got to be a book that I've read before that kind of like changed my mindset on that. And you kind of talk about it a little bit too. But I still feel like when I'm in a room with people, even like yourself and other people who are doing things that I want to do, I still
yeah.
struggle with that internal where it's like, man, I don't feel like I have a seat here yet. And but sometimes I don't know. Sometimes maybe that's a good thing if you can like twist it a certain way to motivate you and not kind of diminish what you're trying to accomplish
Yeah.
when you're talking to groups of people, and coaching other individuals. What's something that's like a kind of like a starter point of, hey, here's where you can start to transition the way you think so that you don't feel this way as you work to accomplish the big goals you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So one of the big revelations that I had in the journey of, in particular, writing this book, because as a part of this book, I took a long look back on my life and career and kind of where the traps had been and where I had struggled, and as well as where my success had been and how I had overcome some of those challenges. And in addition to looking at my life, I interviewed, I don't know, probably over 100 entrepreneurs and leaders of different types to share some of their stories and examples as well. And one of the things that I realized was that the moments that I felt insecure, the moments I felt the most insecure, that I was worried I was in over my head, that I was worried that I didn't know what I was doing, usually that was a sign that I was doing something important and valuable. I
Hmm.
was getting outside my comfort zone. I was learning something new. I was attempting something for the first time. I was interacting with a new group of people that maybe, as you said, were a little further down the road or a little more accomplished than me. And I started to realize that those feelings of insecurity can actually be a sign of positive, of forward momentum, of
Yeah.
growth, of something happening. And so once I recognize that pattern, I start to get a little bit excited when I feel a little self-doubt. Like
Yeah.
the self-doubt can really quickly turn to, ooh, what's happening here right now? Who am I with? What am I doing? Where's the growth happening? What am I learning? And so that's one big mindset shift that has helped me. And a second one, you only asked for one, but I'm going to give you a bonus. The
Yeah.
second one is when I realized that that my success and my confidence, it's really about my confidence doesn't have to be based on having all the answers.
Mhm.
My confidence can be based on my ability to find the answers. So when I go into a new situation, I don't have to pretend that I have it all figured out and I'm going to get it right and it's going to be perfect. And I don't have to worry that if I make a mistake, that means I've failed or I'm no good at this thing.
Yeah.
Because anytime I try something new, the prerequisite is inexperience.
Yeah.
The prerequisite for learning is that you don't know something.
Yeah.
And so when I started to recognize that my confidence can be drawn from my ability to figure it out, the fact that I have a track record of learning new things and trying things and experimenting my way to success, the fact that I have developed the skills around doing new things and stretching myself, I can be confident in that ability rather than in having all the knowledge I need for the thing I'm facing right at this moment, which I almost never have.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. That word confidence was one I was thinking about before you and I hopped on here, because that's exactly what I was kind of thinking about myself, is like the more that I get out of that comfort zone, there's that line. You just have
Yeah.
to push a little further and a little further. And every time you do that, you seem to just get more and more confident and not care when you maybe trip up a little bit, or when you, I
Yeah.
don't know, you don't accomplish exactly what you're trying to. But then your thoughts do shift. Instead of kind of giving up and falling back, you're like, huh, I'm one step closer to probably figuring this out, so I'm going to keep going. And
Yeah.
it becomes more motivating. And it's interesting to see people start doing that, because I don't know, there's just like a light bulb, and then all of a sudden, like, the motivation and confidence just blast them off into another level. And that's when you see these people really start elevating and doing the things they want to do, and you see them accomplishing what they want. It's so cool to see people break that barrier, and to not kind of fall back on that imposter thought, and give up too early.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's
You
just
you're
intriguing.
not a fraud because you're learning. You're not an
That's right. That's a
imposter
great way to
because you
put
don't
that.
have all the answers, right? You are an explorer. You're in learning mode. You're in growth mode. That is what we do. And so you can draw confidence in that identity of I'm a figure it out kind of person and this is what I do is I learn my way to success.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word vulnerability earlier too. It's okay to be vulnerable as you're learning, and honestly, you kind of get that confidence too. Like, I'm probably gonna trip. I'm probably gonna fall. I'm probably gonna look dumb doing something for a little while. But as long as you kind of don't care at some point, that's kind of when you're able to cross that threshold and get to where you want a little bit easier. When you just, again, flip that switch, which is so intriguing to see people do. Um, well, as you kind of in your career, and again, this is a subject that you realized you needed, you kind of were learning from yourself.
Yeah.
Were as you grew, and were there people that you looked up to? You got to have the Tony Robbins of the world, and the coaches where they help you figure out that mindset switch and whatnot. But were there people you followed, or even books that you read that maybe you read over and over
Mm.
again each year that have an impact on you and what you're doing now?
Um, there's probably not a lot that I read over and over again, other than the
Yeah,
Bible that I read pretty regularly.
yeah,
There are several that I find myself referencing quite a lot, though.
mhm,
And so some of the authors who've really, really inspired me are Patrick Lencioni on the leadership front.
yeah,
His work, and he talks a lot about vulnerability and authenticity and the basis of trust that you've
mhm,
got to have to build a great team and to have a healthy organization and all of those things. And so I've leveraged that a lot. Carol Dweck's book on mindset is a really powerful set of research. I thought I understood what a fixed mindset and a growth mindset were until I read that book, and then I realized, oh, okay, I had that I had a little bit of that misconstrued, and in fact, where I would have said I have a growth mindset, there are some areas of my life where I had a fixed mindset, and I had to
Yeah.
start to reframe that. And so some of those have been really powerful and valuable. There's one other that I think has been, it's one of the books I recommend most often, is called How Will You Measure Your Life by the late Clayton Christensen.
Okay.
And he takes a lot of his business research and study and applies it to the other areas of our life, our personal life, our health, our spiritual life, our family life, etc. And it is really, really powerful.
Good deal. Yeah, I'm gonna add that to my reading list because I find books like that interesting. I love books that you can reference across different verticals of your life,
Yeah.
personal, business, leadership, because while they all can be a little different, they all can be integrated in a lot of ways too. When you can take a lesson and spread that out over a few different things, I always like finding the message and kind of what that looks like. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, I love that. So your book's coming on about 4 years old now. And
Yep.
I'm sure as you've continued to coach people and you've continued to reference your book and people have reached out to you to say like, hey, here's what I learned from it. I'm sure that's so rewarding knowing that you've written this and you're helping others. Do you foresee yourself in the future writing another book at some point?
Yeah, I think I will. So first of all, I'll say that writing is hard work for me and I do not enjoy it. Okay. I know some authors who turn out a book a year and they write a ton and they would just write for the fun of it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that is not me. I wish I enjoyed it more and I wish I was better at it.
Yeah.
But, I, I have seen the value of having written a good book and poured myself in, and it took a lot out of me the year that I spent writing this book. And but I've gotten so much value from it, and so many people have benefited that I do believe I will do it again.
Yeah.
I've got some ideas. People keep asking me, what's your next book, and what's the follow up from this, and I'm noodling on some things, but man, this book has a long shelf life.
Yeah.
And I'm still doing a lot to get the word out and, traveling around the country and talking to people even around the world. I just shipped several cases of this book over to Africa for a
Wow.
program that's going on over there. And there's some really good things happening. And so I'm not in a rush to write the next book. I don't feel like there's a pressure to write the next
Yeah.
book, but I have a feeling that that will come at some point.
Yeah. Well, and you're someone who's constantly learning and constantly growing as well. And so sort of like this book, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's going to be a time where you uncover another need that you identify that people could use
Yeah.
some extra, help with. And I'm sure that will be kind of something that gives you the idea and motivation to say like, yep, here's what I'm writing about. Here's where I see people could use this and benefit
Yep.
from it. But it is interesting. I mean, I've been reading leadership and personal development books for about 10 years now. Kind of I wish I'd have read them a little bit longer than that. And that's kind of the
Yeah.
whole point of Books4Guys, is trying to get books into young men's hands faster. Cause like myself,
Yes.
I'm always like, I wish I'd have read this 5 years ago. It really would have helped me at that time. But it's interesting though, because none of the books that I've read talk about this. No one really admits like, hey, I felt like a fraud. But when you talk to them, or you kind of like, they kind of mention it, like, hey, I didn't know
Yeah.
what I was doing. I was tripping up. I kind of wasn't very confident in myself. So they say it without saying it. But your book is the first book that I've ever come across that directly tackles this issue with people.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of the people you work with, entrepreneurs, leaders, um, I even worked with some of the people I've worked with over the years. They say the same thing. They're like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
figure it out. And I love the vulnerability, because that gives me more confidence as a person, knowing like, hey,
Yes.
they don't have it all figured out, which means it's okay that I don't have it all figured out. And we're all just trying to
Yes.
grow and get better together.
Yes. Yeah. It's so important. And I wrote in the book that I experienced imposter syndrome while writing a book about imposter syndrome. And And that made me feel like, am I really qualified to write this book? Like, right,
Yeah.
this is something that I'm wrestling with. And so I tell a funny story in there about a conversation that I had that had the potential to kibosh the whole thing if I let it. But I really believe that the book is called Overcoming the Imposter because
Mhm.
it's a present tense continuous effort. It's not a one-time thing that you do. It's a set of habits that you build. It's a mindset shift and a set of disciplines that help you to knock down self-doubt every time you encounter it.
Yeah.
And so that's an ongoing battle, if you will, because the truth is you can build a confidence in one area. You can get to a point where you feel really comfortable and you know
Yeah.
what you're doing, and there is no self-doubt in this particular lane.
Yeah.
But if you're like me and like a lot of entrepreneurial, innovative, high achievers, I'm always trying something new.
Yeah.
And so there's always an area that I'm getting outside of my comfort zone, and that's where the self-doubt can creep in. And so,
Yeah.
rather than treat it like a thing that you just, a battle that you fight one time and you win it and then it's over and behind you,
Yeah.
I attacked this from a perspective of there's a set of disciplines and a set of mindsets and some habits that you can create that will help you to battle self-doubt every time you encounter it, which is likely to be over and over and over in your life.
Yeah. No, that's exactly why your book will have a long shelf life for high achieving individuals, because exactly like you said, there's always another challenge to tackle. There's always something
Yeah.
new to learn. There's always going to be that probably a little bit of self doubt where you're like, am I doing this right? Am I headed in the right direction? And then it's just natural. But it's good that they can have a book to follow back on and say like, okay, yep, switch it again. Let's go do this. We're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
One last question for you, Kris.
Sure.
As someone who's reading your book, or people that are, doing individual coaching, or hearing you speak, if there's one thing, if they hear nothing else, what's the one nugget you hope people take away from your book?
The one nugget,
It can be more than one, but what do you hope somebody takes from it?
well, I think we touched on this earlier, and I think really it's that self-doubt is a positive sign. And it's a sign that you're doing something meaningful, right? The people that don't ever have any self-doubt are the people that do the same thing day in and day out for their entire lives. And they work for the weekend, they punch a clock, they're just trying to get to their next vacation or their next, but they're not really focused on growing themselves, stretching themselves. And so if you have self-doubt, if you worry that you might be in over your head, I want you to start with the idea that that's a good thing overall. Now, it can become debilitating if you let those thoughts dominate your mind. And so you need to manage them. You need to change the narrative. You need to shift your perspective on that. But don't look at it as a flaw or a fault. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not damaged. You are doing something meaningful and important. And you need to be able to manage that to push through it so it doesn't hold you back. But the presence of self-doubt is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. In
Yeah.
fact, it is often the opposite.
I love that. I love that. That's good stuff, Kris. And I know a lot of people are going to find this conversation beneficial. A lot of leaders I work with, we've had similar conversations. A lot of my friends are in the process of building and trying to elevate their lives in different areas. I know some athletes that are, trying to accomplish things themselves, and we all
Yeah.
we all talk about like the struggles and kind of the mental blocks. And I just think a lot of people are going to
Yeah.
really find some good value in this conversation and from reading your book. And so, man, just thank you so much for doing this again. As I'm excited to talk with people, I'm excited to answer some questions, because I know I'm going to have some friends text me and they're going to be like, dude, I'm reading the book. Like, what do you think about this? Like, so
Yeah.
I'm excited to have those conversations with them. And, now, just thank you again for taking the time to do this podcast, because it's important on the Books for Guys. So I mean, I even have friends who are like, just learning how to take on higher level readings as they become,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
move into a management role, or they're trying to, build a business. And it's just, this book I just think is going to be so beneficial to them and their path and what they're trying to do.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me on. Give me some time to share some of the things that I've learned over the years, and some of the things that I've tried to impart to my colleagues and clients and audiences around the world. And I love that you highlighted the conversation, the discussion that takes place when you read a book like this, because that was a big part of my goal in writing this book, was to start conversations, to get people talking about something that they weren't talking about. You know, the sinister thing about imposter syndrome is it makes you feel like you're the only one. And so you can isolate, you can be afraid to speak up and mention it. But the moment you do, what I found is other people say, oh yeah, that's me too. And let's help each other through this. And so my goal is always to start a conversation and to change the nature of the discussions that are happening in organizations and associations and the groups where I speak and where I coach. So
Yeah.
thank you for helping me start that conversation.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing like having somebody on the journey with you and being able to lean on and talk about this stuff with, because it's
Yeah.
just, again, it helps kind of minimize your self doubt, knowing that someone else is having similar thoughts. And
Yes,
when you can lean on each other and build, man, that's powerful.
really
So,
does.
but Kris, thank you again, man. I appreciate it so much and can't wait to share this with our audience.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Kris.